So I got the project, not too big, but enough to put a few tags. I will talk about a few aspects of spatial ecology of white-tailed eagle in my region. So it is northeastern Poland, and I represent Eagle Conservation Committee, a non-government organization from Poland, which deals mostly with birds of prey, but also black stork, like Eagle Club do. Okay, this is about my background. It's my background, not necessarily the background of the birds that I tracked. This is northeastern part of Poland. The famous places here are Białowieża, Primeval Forest, and Biebrza Valley. So this is, in terms of habitat, this place is maybe not the best for white-tailed eagles, and we have probably about 60 pairs of estimated 60 pairs with 51 territories known, but the northern part and the southern part are quite far away from the capital city, and we don't have many volunteers there. So the northern parts are the lakelands, and probably there are much more white-tailed eagles there. But from here on, there are 2 lakes in this whole area. So white-tailed eagle is mostly associated here with river valleys and fish ponds. There are almost no natural lakes, 2 and quite small. So, like it was already said, I obtained the funding from National Geographic in 2013, and this was quite a small grant. So there were, I had money for a few tags, not too much. As already I was experienced in telemetry, but of spotted eagles, so it was quite easy to plan this research, or to put the device on the birds. I used Ecoton GPS GSM loggers, which were devised for white-tailed eagle. Eventually, a year before, I put my first logger on white-tailed eagle, but this was without the lifted solar panel. And after 2 months, it was grown with feathers, and I was already disconnected from the data because the first one was not adjusted to length of white-tailed eagle's feathers, so it was too small. Okay, lodgers were fixed. Lodger fixes were gathered in interval of between half hour. This was the minimal interval, which was possible, and 3 hours. Mostly accessible. I think winter time 3 hours was also possible, but I have to admit that when the birds were in Belarus, the roaming fees were higher, so I had to get less data than the lodgers could have, because I was counted extra for roaming from Belarus. So from Belarusian birds Belarus were getting less fixes than they could. Okay, and the data was stored in ArcGIS, and home range analysis were done in ArcMed plugins. I counted minimum convex polygons for the juveniles, and for the adults also kernel density functions. As of course, catching adults is difficult, and labor intensive, and I even didn't. I tried for 2 days and let it go. So mostly I was putting the tags on juveniles at the late nesting stage, like here, like you can see here, and on 2 adults that were found weakened and very quickly recovered. So they were already wild birds that they were weakened probably because of poisoning. So they were already white birds without contusions that could indicate that they will not do their best in the wild. So this is number of fixes that were gathered in different years. First, I obtained only 2 tags because they didn't manage to produce more in 2013. So I put 2 tags on siblings in one nest, and one was the shortest tracked, and the other was the longest tracked bird by me. This one didn't leave its nest site even. Only was found dead quite close on the nearest fish points in the end of August. But this one was tracked. I tracked this bird for till 5 calendar year old, and other birds were tracked for a few months up to 3rd calendar year, and in some cases, hopefully, the lodgers stopped to transmit, but in other, of course, in most cases, even the tracked birds, tracked individuals, simply died. I will talk about it later. Now, the birds that were tracked for 4 years till 5 calendar years gave 30,000 fixes, and the adult that we fitted with GSM logger this year gave us almost 4,000 during the breeding season, so till almost end of September. There was different strategies of nest territory abandonment, because one bird was, many birds were doing some kind of trips to 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, or even more, and then got back. This bird eventually left its territory in end of the parent's territory end of January next year. So quite a long it stayed, maybe because it was the only one nestling, because the other died, and probably it was spoiled by the parents, maybe, and the other bird, which maybe doesn't look like here, but eventually in the end of July it left here and then go back, but never turned back to the vicinity of the nest site, but stayed in Biebrza Valley. We could see that most of birds are generally sedentary and show some kind of wandering, mostly in the radius of 300 kilometers, or the tags were put generally here, and the longest distance, which was the longest movement, was from the bird, which directly moved south and got to Romania, and just 400 meters after the border it died. And I shouldn't cut this point here, this line here, because it is moved to the founder's home probably. So it was found dead here. So it was the longest movement, 800 kilometers. Maybe it would move further, but it died. I will tell why in a short time. But mostly there some birds were very sedentary. Maximum distances covered from the nest site were up to 150 kilometers in this bird, in this little more, but generally they stayed mostly in eastern Poland and Belarus, and few trips were also down north, but in the summertime, not during the first trip, but in the following summer times, mostly during second calendar year. Few birds which I tracked for at least 3 seasons I would like to show. This is the birds which was tracked for 4 years. So about there was a trip to Lithuania, so to Belarus, but generally it stayed this is almost half of a year in the parents' territory. Then it moved to the valley of Vistula. This is the greatest, the biggest river of Poland. Here is a very good place for white-tailed eagles. There is a dam it's called Włocławek dam, and about 100 immatures are during winter time there. Next movements you can see also Vistula River, but a few other places and eventually the birds died. although it was June, the bird was experienced death in June near the river, probably poisoning. Which why bird in 5 calendar years old would die in June? It's experienced bird, but we don't know the death causes. It was found on the island, in Vistula River on the island. It was not in a good shape when it was found already. And this is all the movements, about 30,000 fixes. The next bird stayed quite a long time in south of Biebrza Valley and some fish points there. Then for the winter it moved south, and then again some trips up to Latvia also. And again trips to very nice place, very large fish points in Belarus. Few individuals were spending a lot of their time there, and eventually this bird probably lives there more. But there were a lot of fixes, but with good activity, with good temperature, but stopped working last season. And all of its movement, including one summer trip to Latvia. The other bird was the bird who was very sedentary, but its sibling is the bird which moved to Romania. So one sibling moved south to Romania, and the other was very sedentary. In the nest nearby, once I ringed three chicks, and one was observed in the wintertime near Vistula, so also about 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers, while the other moved to Italy. So siblings from the one nest can show very different movements. Next year, and unfortunately, the bird died in October in the fish points. And last juvenile from the same nest as the first one also showed similar, quite short movements mostly, but there were two trips. Two longer trips, one to Latvia and one to Estonia. And it was 50 kilometers from here. And eventually the bird, one of the adult birds that were caught weakened. But this bird was caught weakened in the fish ponds where there are at least one, or maybe even maybe two territorial birds. Okay, it was a good occasion, weakened bird, weakened adult in the fish ponds. Probably this is our breeder, so we will put a tag. It was released further north near the rehabilitation center, because the director of this center wanted to attract some media, and we thought that it was lost because it moved a lot, 140 kilometers from this place, and turns out that this is non-breeder. For 3 consecutive seasons, this adult was non-breeder without a territory. And then the lodger stopped transmitting because it was already retrieved tagged. So it was found here, released here, and never came back north, and never bred, and it changed its location. And generally, if you would take a look on those movements between years, in, for example, those two juveniles, you can see that the same places are visited few times, sometimes few times a year, or few times per lifetime. Like Petri said, that the birds have their map. They have their map based on their experience, and they are visiting those. I wrote it like notes. Like there's a note, fish point. There's a Vistula River. Here are good fish points, Vistula River, fish points here, and that sort of stuff. But the non-territorial male was also moving over quite a big, not such a big, but quite a big area. But there are no such visible notes like in this case. And all the dispersers are already ended from this bird tracked in 2013, 14, and 15. In 15, so 2 birds stopped transmitting, but 5 were unfortunately dead, and those are the siblings, yeah, for these variants. One, the first died 2 months after fledging, and the second one 56. No, generally, most of birds died in first half of first half of the year after fledging. Reasons for mortality: the birds in Romania was electrocuted. One bird, this who lived very shortly, was most probably poisoned. Foresters admitted that their friend is poisoning otter on his fish ponds, and the bird was found dead there. And one was probably poached because there's a place where we found lots of birds shot, poisoned at the Biebrze Valley, but we don't have any proof for this particular poacher. And 2 cases, the reason was unknown. The mortality took place in different months, twice in October, but also in June. So it's this unusual thing for experienced bird to die in June. I think home range of juveniles, of course, is not so interesting, but it was tens of square kilometers for most of birds, and for the adults, the non-breeding adults, it was depending on the method, it was up to 10,000 square kilometers. But the male who we fit with GPS logger this year had very small home range, and you can see this is the male in Biebrze Valley, so it is surrounded by other territorial males. This had three youngs this year. Unfortunately, the brood had failure at the incubation phase, but probably it couldn't move too much. This is the aerial photo of its territory, and if you would take a look at the GPS fixes, almost 4,000 GPS fixes, so except for the nest site, so there are lots of here. And this is an artificial canal in which there are few particular trees or group of trees where it was perching for the whole season. And this non-territorial adult switched few places, and generally it behaved like one place, river or fish points or small fish points, mostly river valleys. It stayed or agricultural landscape. It stayed for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and changed the place to other. So if you look at the dynamics during annual dynamics, you can see that generally the home ranges are most the biggest during springtime, and then in the winter time the home ranges are very small, and probably that's because in the springtime they use often river walleys, and move along river walleys. Then the prey is maybe abundant, but more difficult to take than in the autumn time or summertime, sometimes where they mostly prey on fish ponds, those immatures, of course. And thank you for attention.
Thank you very much. Paweł, have you one question? Sorry.
Thanks for the presentation. Did you make any estimations of mortality of youngs?
I would say that it's about 60 or 70%, but most of the mortality causes would be probably anthropogenic ones, so probably birds in.
Okay, if not, how many percent survived for the first year of life?
The first, this was like, it was visible, so 3 out of 7 birds died during the first year. 3 out of 7.
Thanks.
During even those first half of year.
Thank you. And no more questions are available. You can turn to Paweł directly. And yeah, you can join.
It will be very important, but I don't trust my biometry skills. And if you can see the picture of Croatians also, so the discrimination, I didn't do molecular analysis, so measurements were not